Welcome to the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I'm your host, Jacob Cooper, best-selling author of Life After Breath and the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Today's guest on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder for this week's episode is Susanne Wilson. Susanne is a world-renowned medium. She's also an author, a podcast host, and much more. And so Susanne is going to be delving into her gifts of mediumship, as well as discussing the higher realms, extraterrestrial realms, as well as her own near-death experience that really accelerated her path of healing and messages from loved ones. So Suzanne's going to be joining us in the channel. But for those of you who are new to my channel, we love having you. Make sure you hit that subscribe button as well as bell notification icon to get up to date for weekly interviews coming your way on the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder. Without further ado, we bring on Susanne Wilson here on the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder. Susanne Wilson, thank you so much for being my honored guest here on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I was an honored guest, on the Carefree, Medium channel. I think it was about like a year or two ago. And, here you are coming on my channel, but I've always been a big fan of your work and just all of your public work and the amount of lives that you continue to just support and provide a lot of healing towards. But for my viewers who haven't heard of Susanne, could you briefly describe, and I know it's hard because I know your work is constantly shape-shifting and evolving, but maybe describe some of the offerings and just just specificities of the work that you do today.
Well, first off, Jacob, thank you for inviting me on. I always enjoy our conversations, and I think this is going to be a very helpful, hopeful, and healing one. I live for the day that everyone who wants to on this earth can make their own direct connection with their higher self, their spirit guides, their guardian angels, their interdimensional allies, on their own without having to get a reading. I understand that people need to get readings and need to develop their abilities, but what it's really all about is trust. And so my mission is to help people trust in their own intuitive and abilities and gifts of the spirit. Intuitive abilities and gifts of the spirit are what every single person on earth has, whether or not they realize it. And I meet people who say, I don't have anything psychic about me. I don't know how this works. And I just tell them, you have to start trusting those first instincts that come to you. And how I learned this was I was a small child getting insights constantly, and I would see colors and shapes around people, and it evolved into seeing spirit people around others. So I'm talking about 4 years old, 5 years old, and I had to learn how to deal with all of that. So I had a mentor in my family. My grandfather helped me, and I'd be happy to talk about him during this session. But what I really did was feel ashamed about not fitting in. For many, many years, I would secretly go to psychic development workshops and sit in a mediumship development circle. But I wanted that corporate success. I was in academia. I was an administrative director for a Center for Leadership and Innovation at a university. I had a great corporate HR job for what's now a $7 billion company. I think it was a $4 or $5 billion company when I was there. And I wanted stuff and money, but I loved having these abilities. I just didn't want anybody to know. I had a near-death experience in 2007, and it, I guess you could say, it literally changed my mind about what's important in life and afterlife. And here we are.
Wow. Suzanne, we have a lot in common, because I know we both were very tuned in at a young age. And, it's kind of like, and I speak about this often on my channel, but that movie, I don't know if you saw it, The Hereafter with Matt Damon, where he basically tries to just bury his gift, but eventually, you run, but you can't hide. And eventually the gift will come, to you. What's your definition of a gift? Because it seems like for your life, it was maybe not seen as that case, or was it something that it only became a gift once you started to own it? So like what is exactly a gift, would you say?
That's a great question, and a very insightful question.
Mm.
Everyone has his or her own unique gift, and the key is identifying it as soon as you can in this life. And if you feel like you're a late bloomer, that's okay. Just identify your gift now and leverage it to make your life better, to make the lives better of those you love, and to help people you don't even know, because we're all connected. We're all one. A gift can be being a good listener, being a stabilizing, calm force in chaos, making music, making art, being the person that is reflecting back the best in another human being. We all have gifts. And as a colleague of mine often says, I simply opened mine.
Yes, yes. And I find often, I don't know if you notice this, but a lot of times shake-up periods of the soul will allow some of those gifts to really come up to the surface, whether that um, is losing a loved one or in grief. But it seemed like for you that NDE opened a lot of that up. Is that?
It did. It definitely did. I think we all go to the school of hard knocks here on Earth. I call Earth the rough-hewn classroom, because it is. It seems like we don't come here to have everything easy. We can do that when we're in our heavenly home, when we're in our real home, the other side of life. And it does take sometimes hitting rock bottom, but not always. Sometimes it's just something that gets your attention and makes you pay more attention to signs, synchronicities, things going on in your life.
Well, I think for viewers, we'll just discuss. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty. I know we were discussing, some of the shake-up periods of the soul and their impacts. But for viewers listening, Susanne and I just had a little bit of technological disturbance, which is quite common for end ears. When two end ears connect, forget one, but when two, this is quite common. But why do you feel it is that end ears or in mediums or people who are connected have a conversation, technology goes haywire? Is that Mercury retrograde? Is it? Yeah.
It's not enough people are talking about that. And I think that this is a great opportunity. I know the difference between a tech glitch and something else going on, because I'm looking for an odd sensation or some concurrent anomaly. And what happened just now was, as we were talking about the School of Hard Knocks and a near-death experience, there were flashes of light in this office, and I have studio lighting, but these were separate from that. They're not coming from any light fixture. I don't have a dimmer or anything like that in the room. And then the mic cut out and I'm plugged directly into the router, but it was almost as though I had bad Wi-Fi, which makes no sense. So it's not just a tech difficulty when you have that odd feeling and you see some concurrent phenomena. I believe it's because we have stepped into the other dimensions and we bring some of that energy back with us, and it stays in our auric field forever. You can go and incarnate 500 more times over the next many millennia, and there will be people that will see in your aura while we're on the other side and say, oh, we had a near-death experience in 2007, because it's right there. It's in our field. It will play with electricity. It will generate its own EMF or electromagnetic frequency. And I've measured it with millimeter before when things have been happening between people who have had NDEs. So it's interesting, but it just points to the fact that we're energetic beings and we're multidimensional beings ourselves.
Oh, yeah. And it's very validating, because I think for you, you're saying like your internet's perfect, mine's perfect, but it happens time and time again or eventually I'm going to stop calling, like, you know, Best Buy, whatever, because they're not going to understand. They're going to go and just touch the computer, say everything is fine. I feel bad for my video editor because sometimes she has to work overtime, but she understands that when people are high vibrational or have experienced an NDE, they carry a lot of that. And there's almost like a timelessness that you have with your near-death experience, particularly when you talk about it as if you're right there. But briefly, in 2007, I know you mentioned the NDE was very pivotal in your life's trajectory. Could you just share, you know, what exactly happened? Because I've never personally heard, you know, the exact details of your NDE directly. So, and some of my viewers haven't. So I know my viewers love NDEs, but for you, like what happened to, you know, at that event?
Well, first off, I need to give you the setting where my life was. And I was in my corporate role. I was going to school on the weekends for a PhD in human resources development, human potential. And so I was a very, very busy lady. Every once in a while, I could fit in going to a workshop with some of my teachers that were in town or sitting in mediumship circle, but it wasn't my focus at all. And it was secret. I mean, yeah, on pain of death, my couple of people who knew about this, do not tell a soul. And that's just because I needed to be taken seriously. I liked my stock options, my cars, and we had a yacht, jet skis, and all this. So it's doing pretty well. And I had a lot of sinus infections. I went to an allergy specialist. This is very rare, but I had anaphylaxis during allergy testing. And I've since met two people, only two, that reached out hearing me on radio shows that millions listen to. Only a couple have reached out to me and said, I had the same thing happen. So I know it's even more rare because, you know, you get a million emails after you're on something like that, but only a couple have had this. But here's what happened. I was back for the second appointment where they up the dosage of the allergen and they're punching it into your arm and seeing how your arm reacts. So it's only your arm is supposed to react. If it gets like red, itchy, and really has a reaction, okay, that's something that we have to look into. Maybe you're allergic to, let's say, grasses, molds, or something like that. Well, I started getting very, very warm. And I lived in Florida at the time, and it was a little warm in the office. So I told the tech that was testing me, and we were alone in a room. I told her I'm getting warm, and she goes, maybe you're having a hot flash, which I thought, no, I actually don't get those. But I let it go. And then I started getting really nauseated, and I told her that. And she goes, well, we're almost through. And then I started feeling my throat begin to close, and I started honking. It was this honk, honk, honk noise coming out of my throat that I couldn't control. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't get air. And she took off. Well, she took off to get help, but I'm there alone. And I'm thinking, this is not good. Then the techs and the doctors come back. There's two techs. There's two doctors. And one tech holds me up, sitting on the table by one shoulder. The other's at my other shoulder. And I hear the doctor saying, hold her up, hold her up. I would find out later, you're not supposed to lie down because something can happen with your heart, whatever. And then I do remember saying, getting out the words, help me, but it was more like a, like that, and the honking in between honks. And then I heard a pop, and I thought something had popped down the hall. It was me stepping out of the body. It was me. I felt my heart slow down. I felt the pop. It was like all like this. And I, as many times as I talk about this, it took me years to talk about it at all. My voice gets shaky. My heart pounds a little bit. I actually will feel a little bit of the pain. But when I get to this part, I feel really good. The popping was me coming out, and I'm standing behind my body a little bit off the ground and looking at the back of my head, looking at the two techs holding me up, looking at the two doctors. One doctor is on the phone, ostensibly calling for an ambulance.
Wow.
The other doctor is opening a cabinet and throwing things from the cabinet and getting to what he wants, which is to prepare injections. And then they all slowed down into very slow motion. Now, I felt arms around me where I was, and I wasn't really concerned so much as stunned, but those arms were my grandfather, who passed when I was a teenager, who had been my mentor through all the things that I could see and feel and help me understand that those are gifts from God. Someday you'll know what to do. And he left this earth. I'm so young when he left. I was bereft. Well, here he is. I don't see him, but I feel his arms around me, and I know it's him. I see these beautiful colors. They're swirling, they're dancing, they're indescribable colors. I hear this beautiful music, and I'm a musician myself. And so I can tell you that the music was going in waves, and it was a major key, and it kept changing keys, and it kept going in a crescendo. And it was very comforting. And I just wanted to go with my grandfather and go to where the music was. But meanwhile, I couldn't help but look at my body sitting there being held up, and the techs and the doctors, because they were moving so slowly and they did not look real. Now, this is my perception of them. They're not changed. My perception's changed. They look like they're one-dimensional, flat, and the eyes are just dead. Like, that's not really who they are, type of thing. And I know that is who they are, but there's so much more to us. I felt like I'm in the real world. They're in the fake world. Right? And so that was odd, but I had no desire to get back in that body. And that was exciting. That was, whoa. And I'm saying somehow, without moving my mouth, which I realize that it's telepathic, I'm saying, "Oh, Granddad, I'm so happy." And I wanted to be with him. And I thought we were going to go to where that music was. And I heard this very odd voice, not his. I would not call it the voice of God. I don't know what it was. Just say, "Your work has not started yet." And then I could see finally the injection going into the body, my body. And I just sort of got, just without any kind of warning or anything, I felt that was quite sudden and quite fast, get just sort of vacuumed back into the body. And then the pain. Then it's, this I'll never forget. It was like, I don't think I've ever told anybody what this felt like, because it's kind of gross. Do you want to know what it felt like?
Whatever you feel comfortable discussing. I mean, certainly with near-death experiences, people forget that it's a double-edged sword. As euphoric as it is, there's also a lot of trauma that it brings up. And so, as always with my guests, I encourage them to just discuss whatever they feel called to talk about.
You know? And this feels really good to hear you say that, because I think I'm finally ready to say the word torturous to come back into the body. This is not pleasant. This is like being cut in half horizontally and having somebody like with a hot iron ironing my throat and my chest. It's like hot, stabbing, but heavy pain. And I have no other way to tell you that. Unfortunately, it didn't last long. Whatever they injected me with, I understand later there were 2 different things they injected me with, really helped. But coming back in that body, I have to tell you about it, because the contrast is so great between being out of body and going back into a damaged physical body. It's like all those nerve endings just got so primed for feeling. And it's not a great feeling. I think I've talked to, I don't know how many people, asking what did it feel like coming back into the body? And nobody likes it, but they don't tell you how great that contrast is. There's no words. There are no words, and how unreal it feels to come back in. I knew I was going to be okay, but I did not want this in this moment. I wanted to go with the music with my granddad. I wanted to sort of dissect those colors and figure out how they made them. I mean, I'm literally thinking about the exploration that I just got cheated out of in that moment. And that all flashes so fast. That's the thing about the NDE. People are like, how could you possibly in a minute have all that kind of experience and all these thoughts? It's because you're in touch with 100% with your soul, your higher self, who you are in that moment. It's everything is, I don't want to say explained, because there's no explaining necessary. Everything is known, everything's understood, and then you lose it all. Then you're back in the body, and it's back to the battle of the physicality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think when I hear you talk, it's almost like hearing my own story. And I think it's very comforting to kind of know that we're all connected to the same stuff, but we're also a part of a smaller percentage of the population who, until you experience this, you only know. And so everyone wants to go to heaven, but not everyone is willing to go to hell to kind of get there, so to speak, and we went through not literal hell, but physical torture in a way. And I think that's the missing link that people forget, but also the psychological turmoil that many NDEers have. Now, Susanne, your experience was profound, and I thank you for sharing, because it seems like a lot of the factors that you were connected to in this life amplified. I know you were a musician or into music, and that was a part of it. Your grandfather, who was a guide over here, was over there. Might I ask, do you think there's a uniformity to a degree with the life that we live over here with it over there? Or do you think what we experience here has nothing to do in our afterlife, that it's totally different? I'm wondering, from your perspective as an NDEer and evidential medium, does this life influence our afterlife, would you say?
I feel that we get transported to a place that we can handle. And so if you have done research, you've done prayer and meditation, and you're having a near-death experience, or you've just physically died and you're starting your travel, you're going to go via a route that will comfort you, not scare you. And it's what you're ready for. So I've heard some souls that are giving great evidence in a reading. Their loved one really wanted to know, what was it like when you passed? Some will tell me they were at the train station and they were directed to get on a certain train, not this one, that one. And that's what they needed to see. And when they got off the train, they were greeted by, their dog, their cat, their former spouse who passed, all those sorts of things. Others feel instantly like they're in a place that the beauty is unsurpassed. It seems to be like whatever this so-called airport, if you will, is, that's in the in-between state, it's taking us to a match of our vibration and what we can accept, without putting us into some shock where we'll try to avoid going into the light. And that's the thing. Free will applies all the time. In heaven and on earth, free will always applies. And so if you were to see something, like I needed to see color, I've been clairvoyant all my life. When I think about this, I needed to hear music, because I hear songs as messages. It's the word from the song or the song itself. I like to play several instruments.
Wow.
I got what I needed. I needed my grandfather, really the only person that ever really got me for decades in my life. I got what I needed and got what I was ready. Now, if you're talking about full-on physical death, Some of the things we learn from the souls on the other sides, and about 20 decades of afterlife research from verified mediums giving messages from spirits who give good evidence, we hear that your aura is your transporter, that once you get off that train or once you arrive at that place and that cord is cut because the physical body's died, it's not an NDE. You're not coming back. Now you're off the train or out of the airport or whatever comparison you want to make. You've been transported to your vibration. It's going to take you where you need to go. So if someone is an abuser and they've been abusive of people or animals, then they're going to go someplace where they're offered healing and they're offered the chance for introspection. If someone's like you and me, we, basically try to do the right thing every day. We're compassionate as much as we can be. We're human too. We make mistakes. We're going to go to a place where we can review how well we did, and we can assimilate into a society, and we can make plans for how we want to study, learn, travel. We can have our reuniting with the people and the pets and the teachers. We can then remember why we went through all of the crap that we went through on this earth, the rough-hewn classroom. So yeah, your energy is your transporter. That let's not confuse the near-death experience with the death, the physical death experience. One of the ways I like to think about it is the near-death experience is like this. I live near Phoenix. I go to the Phoenix airport. I get on the jet. I fly to Singapore. I get off the jet in Singapore. I walk around the Singapore airport. I go, it's really nice. I get back on the jet and fly back to Phoenix. Somebody asked me, hey, what was Singapore like? Or what was death like? And all I can say is, I don't know, but the airport's sure nice.
So it's kind of like the appetizer or something like that, or the hors d'oeuvres, and it's not the full enchilada, the full meal, but yeah, that's so true.
It's a glimpse.
A glimpse of eternity. Now, Susanne, it seemed like there, a near-death experience, there's one of two ways. Obviously, you don't stay there. Otherwise, it would be a death experience, not a near-death experience. But it's either you're told, hey, it's not your time, or you have an urge to go back. And it seemed like for you, from my understanding, that there was more work to do, as you said. Not you said or you experienced, but I'm just curious. Did you know what was meant from that work, or how did you put the pieces of the puzzle? Because obviously you're doing it right now, the work that you're doing, the author, the books, the readings, but did they specify what work that was?
Jacob, I'm so happy that you asked this question. After this first went down, I was just in an ambulance, and I was wondering where my grandfather went, and I could see him floating above me in the ambulance as I lied there looking up. And I could see him in my hospital room, because they will keep you in the hospital after anaphylaxis. And I totally forgot about this voice. And I think it was because it kind of shocked me and angered me. And I didn't want to, I pushed it to the side. I very much wanted to forget it, because every time I thought about this, I was resentful. What the hell do you mean? I work 60 hours a week. I go to a weekend PhD program.
Right.
I think I'm working really hard.
Talk about never satisfying. It's never enough, Yeah.
Exactly. That was the thing. But what I did was, instead of thinking about that voice and what it meant, I didn't even want to explore that. I had a bigger issue to deal with. I was so wide open that I was seeing spirits everywhere. No need to go to the circle or tune in or take a class, man. They were everywhere. It was hard to exist. I was losing my mind. I didn't know how to tune out. I did not understand that I had the power to tune in and tune out. I thought, they're everywhere. I've lost my mind. I should have just died. And then furthermore, why wasn't I good enough to get in on the other side? I'm a reject. I haven't done enough. I'm not been good enough. And now, God, hey, you left me here with all these spirit people all the time. How am I going to make a living? How am I going to function? I'm going to end up in an insane asylum is what I thought. And so I found out that if I drank a lot of alcohol as soon as I got home from work, that would shut it down. And in the day, I just tried to not look up. I would be at my desk like this, like like putting my hands around my eyes type of thing and not wanting to see anything. But it was hard for a while. I ended up going back to the same teachers who were so good at helping me tune in to learn how to tune out. And once I figured that out, then I could put the booze away. And I hardly ever drink now, even though I'm a certified specialist of wine. So
wow.
I actually went to school for that, among other things. But and then I was ready after I quit drinking to access 7 days a week. I was ready to examine that funny voice that was telling me my work hadn't started. But man, it took years to figure that thing out. And once I identified, what is the one unique gift that I have, and then I was at peace with the NDE. I found on the internet, IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies, for those who don't know. I found them and I realized that's called a near-death experience, what I had. I used to think you had to code on an operating table and have a heart attack and you could call it near-death. And so I found out there were many types of near-death experience. And that was very helpful in understanding myself. But what it really took was realizing my thing. My thing is to not work to make myself more well-known than anybody else or be an international celebrity medium. That's not my shtick. It's about empowerment. Now, if that brings followers or people who want to read your newsletter or watch your videos, or if it helps you raise money for somebody, that's great. That's good stuff. But it's really to empower other people to find what it is in them that is they can work on and they can elevate, because it's one person at a time that will raise the frequency of this earth and ultimately bring about 1,000 years of peace and tranquility so that we have heaven on earth. And that's it. It's about empowerment. I turned down a lot of TV producers. There are people that I won't even call back because I'm concerned that something's going to turn into a scary, bad, evil TV show. I don't want that sort of thing. I don't seek fame. And what's happened is it kind of backfired in a way, because at one point people were like, well, where is she? What's going on? I had 1,000 people on over 1,000 people on wait list for a one-to-one session. And I had to close down that wait list for years and work through it, because it almost gave me like I'm talking to a therapist, almost gave me like a breakdown. The feeling that pressure. And I'm like, wait, that's ego. That's not about me. But we are getting to the point now where when I think about being a child in the 70s, I think about there were no Psychic Kid TV shows, right? Nothing was going on. They were just starting to talk about PSI. They were just starting to talk about the word paranormal. And now, especially with the Gen Z clients that I have, it's like they're pre-wired. They're like, oh yeah, I know this isn't the only place we're ever going to live. I just want to get the most out of this life. Oh yeah, I know where my cat who passed is. I know we're going to be together again, but I want more out of this life. So we're in a really good spot now. And even though the earth feels very, very chaotic, it's just going through a cycle right now. We have to work on ourselves individually, one at a time, and we'll get this frequency up. We're going to get to a good place on earth. So I'm really honored and really excited to be on the earth at this time. But there are those moments, Jacob, and you know what I'm talking about, where you question, why did I have to go through all that? Why all that grief? Why all that loss? And I say loss in air quotes because no one we love is ever really lost. They've changed address to heaven.
Right.
But all that pain, the pain is, sadly, it feels like a lot of that pain is absolutely intrinsic to the growth, don't you think?
I would say so. I think there's a perception that people have, on us, whether that be a medium, a near-death experience, and they look at the surface of things. And I think people, this is across life, but people forget the human element that each person has. And no one's immunized, from that, that we all have our own pain, our sorrow. We all have our own mental health ups and downs. And that's, as we say, no shame in the mental health game. But really, it's not to be ashamed of. It's something we work through. But I find that pain is a gateway to my purpose, but also allows myself to be more grounded, more compassionate, more empathetic, towards others. And it seems for you that that's been the case, where you could have easily got 1, 2, 3, all these deals, and what we're seeing from others, and just kind of like sensationalizing and celebritizing all this stuff. But you had integrity, and I think that's a big crux of your continuity with this work, because you found throughout history, when the gift is not used in the right way, it backfires and it just does not work. And so I think you're very tuned in that you have integrity, you're grounded, and you're using it for the right intentions, not for the ego, but of the service. But from listening to you, I'm amazed how you are, still going on, because I think for a lot of people, that would have broke them in half, feeling like you had this NDE, feeling like a reject from the afterlife, then coming back to this world in the contrasting corporate kind of environment and feeling like you didn't belong there. And so it's so refreshing now to see that you feel a little bit more at home, but I'm sure that took a lot of work. I find a lot of people that I speak to, when they're tuned in, there's a double-edged sword. On one hand, you're connected to that place, but on the other hand, you might be disconnected. How do we cultivate a home for many souls who feel homeless on this planet, many souls who feel disenfranchised, alone, separated, as if no one understands them? How do people work through that from your own experience? And maybe that's something that you're figuring out one day at a time. I don't know. But is there any secret sauce that you could recommend, or insight? Because that is such a pivotal position that many find themselves in.
I wish I could ask everyone on earth to use their intention to connect daily in consciousness with all sentient beings that are in prayer and meditation at that moment. That is incredibly powerful to make that connection. And there are many teachers that are recommending to do this. But when I wake up in the morning, the first thing that I do is say, oh, thank you, I'm still here. All right. I appreciate this gift of this day. Help me to help the most people heal and to heal myself today. And then I say, I am a being of light. I am connecting in consciousness with all sentient beings. Those who are praying and meditating in this moment, I send this light out to all in need of a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual healing. I connect with you. So rather than send good wishes to those who have less or whatever, I'm joining their energy. And in that way, we get to recognize guideposts, synchronicities that point us in the direction where we can be the most effective. I think of the starfish story
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yes, and for anyone that doesn't know, the beach is covered with stranded starfish. The tide has gone out and they're fighting to get back to the water and they can't. And someone is putting them back in the water one by one, and a man comes along and says, "You can't possibly save them all." And the person who's helping says, "But I saved that one." And that's the thing, is when we save one, we save the many. When we help one, we help the many. So many people, and I'm sure you get this question, say, what is my purpose? How can I be of service in a better way or a more effective way, more impactful way? And my only answer is, I've been told that the source will put you in the right place at the right time to be helpful. You simply don't get to see the after effect of your greater work every time.
So true. We have, it's like looking at a picture of art and looking at one pixel that art and thinking that's reality. But when we leave this life behind, we're able to see more the fuller spectrum of our impact on this world. And I think you're right. When you come from a place of service, when you're connected, we are just kind of servants of this light. We just kind of bring it over, and the universe, like you said, will use us in the way that we do. We just have to be open and ready for it. But I love that starfish story. I was in grad school and I had like an older professor, he was like in his 80s. It was a little bit like Tuesdays with Maury's vibe, Mitch Albom, whatever, with this guy, just a very sweet, warm, guy. But he told that story, and there's not a dry eye, because it just shows every little bit counts. We just don't know. There's such a focus today on more is better, and you have to have this big crowd to make a difference and all this. So I think you're right. It's just, you'll never know the impact from that gentle smile, that hello, just saying something nice to someone if you see it. It's just, the small things are the big things. And I totally agree. Now, you have a lot of work, throughout the years that I've noticed that's really transformed and transcended, at least publicly. Can you tell us a little bit about your focus? Because it seems like now you seem like you're in alignment with a lot of what's going on, from people talking about higher dimensional beings to spirit guides. Tell us a little bit about your current kind of focus, and what could audience members understand from some of these higher beings around us? Are we to fear them? Are they to be, are we to worry about them? Or are they here to really give over higher intelligence to us?
I've never shied away from something just because it was incredibly unusual. For a lot of people, just talking about life after physical death is enough for them. They can barely get their heads around that. And so the thinking in the spiritual teaching community for a long time has been, well, for God's sake, don't bring up extraterrestrials. You'll really lose them if you're just getting them to wrap their heads around afterlife. That's never been an issue for me. I've never shied away from talking about what I call our interdimensional allies. And I call them that because it started for me with spirit guides. You are your own spirit guide. You're always connected with other dimensions, with the source energy that is within you, all around you, and is you. But you also have a team of guides that work with you, and not necessarily former human beings. They can be from other dimensions, other star systems. And now this is going mainstream since 2017, since the United States government finally announced the sightings of what they're calling the Tic Tac video with the Navy. And I'm in 2023, we're now in 2024, but in 2023, I was like, geez, guys, it's been 6 years since the New York Times helped to break that news. Why are we not talking more about this? Why was this not some kind of landslide and epiphany in this world? And it's because it's now okay to talk about UAP or UFO, whichever is your preferred term. But recently, I've noticed that the government is using my term, our term, the spiritual teachers who have always talked about our interdimensional allies of interdimensional. And they're saying these beings are not necessarily from other planets or other stars or other systems or other galaxies within this universe, which we know that there are millions of other galaxies, that they're coming through other dimensions. Well, yes, we're interdimensional as well. We just happen to be anchored by a cord of light into our physical bodies that keep us in the third dimension. So I help people meet their spirit guides, get to know who they are, and gain intelligence from them, not to be told what to do or be controlled, but talk to your higher self and the guides around you so that you can make better choices that will serve you and serve this world better. Now, not all interdimensional beings are our friends, but many are. Some are simply tourists, or they seem to be gathering data about us. And many live here already and have for millennia been here on the earth, and they look just like us. So I don't shy away from this, because the fact that when we are on the other side, we see it all. Consider the cantina scene in the original Star Wars movie. You know that one?
I'm not a Star Wars guy, but I will say,
Jacob, shame on you.
I will say, I was on a podcast and I brought up George Lucas's, because I wasn't 100% sure, but George Lucas was believed to have an NDE in a motorcycle accident, from my understanding, in his teenage years. And it's been inferred as to that's where the term the Force was drawn out from, but also obviously his work in working with intergalactic beings and all this stuff. I'm sure, that had to have influenced it or been a trajectory.
I think yes, I would absolutely. I get thumbs up, green light, ding, ding, ding. And those are all three of my symbols for, yeah, you betcha. Here's the thing. We're not the only life form that is sentient, intelligent, and exists. In fact, we're in the master class here on Earth, according to many of the interdimensional allies that I've communicated with. This is a master class. We're pretty darn special to be here. We are also very far behind the other dimensional beings. And we're going to be seeing and encountering them more and their equipment more, because of what some have termed the thinning of the veil. Really what's happening is, because we've had an increase in fear, we've also had an increase in things to pray about, to meditate over. And we are the ones, humanity, we are the ones who are thinning the veil between the dimensions, if you will. And I want you to think of the veils between dimensions, because there are many dimensions. I don't really try to count them. I think, how do you limit an unlimited existence? So I'm not going to say there's 7 or 11 or any of the studies that are out there. That's for the quantum physicists and all those folks. But let's pretend that they're made of Swiss cheese. And Swiss cheese has what? Holes.
Holes. Yeah.
Right. And every once in a while, those holes will line up so that we can see into another dimension. But unfortunately, we're seeing with eyes that are trained to see 3 dimensions. And so if there's something from a much higher dimension, we see it, we're only going to see it at the point of intersection. We're only going to see a slice, because that's all that we can get while we are physically in the 3rd dimension. So for example, recently there was a story in Florida at a shopping mall where dozens of people, and I could have the number wrong, saw 10, 12-foot shadow-like beings walking around the mall. The police were called. Different phenomena that seemed to be electrical happened. Don't hold me to every single detail here, because it's really the crux of this account that matters.
Mm.
When I checked in with my own team, what I heard was, yes, there was an alignment at that time. And here are the interdimensional allies that are like tourists. They were aware that they were being seen, but the attitude was kind of like, well, let's gauge their reaction. Humanity needs to start getting used to us anyway. And of course, it was pure panic and chaos, and strong police presence ensued. Well, yeah, we panicked. We're going to panic for a while, but we're going to start having more of those intersection points where we see more phenomenon. We have to develop our discernment as human beings to know the difference between what is simply an anomalous event, a visit, let's say we're being blessed with being able to see something because our interdimensional allies are getting us used to the fact that they're now wanting to work with us in a more direct way. And the difference between those who just want to scare us by putting on a show and just want to control us. So this is an opportunity for greater discernment. And I think we're living in very exciting times now. But if you will cultivate a relationship with your guides, you will also cultivate your higher self, your wisdom, your gut instincts, and you'll be able to navigate this paradigm shift of the world in which we are going to examine everything, who we are as humanity and who we are and where we rank, if you will, in the cosmos. It's coming. It's here. It's going to be in our lifetimes.
Wow. And you know, I was first introduced to this through Shirley MacLaine's Out on a Limb, who's my birthday twin, April 24th. And Shirley discussed her adventures, and I believe going to Peru when she encountered, an extraterrestrial being or higher being called Maya, who I believe was a Pleiadian. And it was just an amazing experience. But she brought that out, I believe, in the late 80s. And people were like, but it seems like from what you're saying, it's kind of like when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and that occurs throughout all of life. Do you feel a little bit of that is what's happening right now? Like we're getting ready to really take on some of these higher beings? And if so, like, what are they trying to teach us, would you say, for viewers? Like, what are they trying to show us? Are they just showing up and saying hi? Like, what is their MO?
They're not all in unity about what to do with us next. Because the fact that so many of us are not ready to re-examine our religious beliefs, our beliefs about creation versus evolution. And so one of the things that I did to get a better handle on our ancient interactions between interdimensional allies and humanity was I just recently spent a bit of time in Egypt on a study tour, a Star Walker study tour with teacher and colleague William Henry. And we were there studying all over Egypt, the hieroglyphics and the ruins and the temples from the standpoint of the information that was being transmitted about time travel and afterlife and going through portals to different dimensions. And, some people will argue with me and they'll say, look, those hieroglyphics are all about wars and pestilence and how good the crops were that year and how many were killed. I'm like, yeah, that's there. But the trained eye can find other information, and it's not necessarily in some kind of coded form. It's right there for all of us to see that our ancient ancestors in humanity knew information that is now lost to us about how the so-called gods or these other worldly beings, how they looked, how they interacted with us, what they taught us. And the knowledge that was imparted, some of it's lost, but some of it is right there for us to see. And it's about ascension. People talk a lot about ascension, but don't really know what it is. And we could do a whole show on what ascension is. In fact, I'm getting ready to do exactly that myself with students. But the thing is, this is the time now. All of the information that's been left by previous humanity is necessary for us to grasp now by understanding what we were taught, the interactions we had way back in the past. We can understand what we need to do for ourselves now to be ready for the new world. But not every interdimensional being is interested in interacting with us at all. Think about if you go to the zoo, you know, maybe you want to go and watch maybe you want to go to the reptile house, maybe you don't, maybe you would rather go to the monkeys or whatever, but you know, you're on vacation, the zoo happens to be there, you're going to go. For some people, they just don't want to mess with us. And we just seem, and by people, I mean interdimensionals, but we just seem like we're more trouble than we're worth. Fortunately, there are many more, seemingly, many more interdimensional beings that really want to protect the earth. And it feels like, and I'm getting this strongly now for about 20 years, that the earth itself comes first in their priority. And then second to that is humanity, because humanity is always going to recycle. We're always going to exist. We're always going to recycle. We're always going to go into another dimension or several when we leave these bodies. We're not going anywhere, but we may not be able to keep this earth if we don't take better care of it and ourselves. So there's a lot on the agenda in our future. All we have to focus on as human beings right now is our individual selves first. And that is the prayer, the meditation, the having compassion for self, having compassion for all others, monitoring our thoughts, words, and actions for compassion and the greater good.